When Steiner had people making anthroposophical medicines, they did a morning and an evening potentization. And they were careful to use both hands in this process. But they were also careful to always stir towards the heart, which means with the right hand, we're doing counterclockwise. With the left hand, we're doing clockwise. So you start stirring, you create a deep vortex, and then you change hands. All right, you start with that. This is what's going to happen. We have a whistle, or we're going to do a clap or whatever. You move to the next bucket. So you will go to that end, you will go to that end. You got room to do that? Sort of. Okay, let's start the stir. Change hands when you change direction. And I want you changing direction at least 2 or 3 times in each bucket. Move to the next bucket. And give the person at the tail end of the line a chance to catch to the front. Keep stirring. Hopefully you will notice a difference between the first and the second bucket already. Again, notice the difference. Compare the first and the second and now the third. It's not quite musical chairs, but again, stir towards the heart.
Back to where we started.
Yeah, you're back to where you started, right? Okay. All right. There's no pass and no fail in the grading here. Who noticed the difference? What difference was that?
Temperature and smell.
Which is which? What smell?
One of them smelled like manure, and yeah,
Which one smelled like manure?
pretty sure it was that one.
Okay. Anybody agree, disagree?
I agree.
Agree.
Oh, you're sitting right on top of it, aren't you? No? Or you're close to it? All right.
These smelled. I thought this one smelled like manure when I first started.
Okay, that's where you started out? Okay. All right, well, A and B, one of those is barrel compost and one of them is 500. Care to take a stab at which one is which?
Well, this one had more particulate in it when I started, so compost.
I think A is compost.
Pardon?
I think that A is compost.
They felt denser. Denser? Well, it
Denser. A was denser?
felt denser than
Okay.
like these two felt more like silken almost. And it wasn't the particulate that made it dense, or that's not what I was feeling.
Okay.
It was how the vortex was forming, how quickly. And
Were
I
any of them
felt
easier to
that-
stir than the others?
I felt that with D, a density.
Which one was easiest to stir?
E and F.
C.
E in
Yes.
particular. That's the only one that I smelled.
Just smelling, that's the only one I smelled. And it doesn't
Okay.
smell like manure.
C.
Beg pardon?
C.
C was easier to stir? Okay. Who agrees that C was easier to stir? It was E? E was easy to stir. All right. E on that row is different than E on that row, so let's keep that in mind. So that E is this. So guess what? Water, plain water, is easier to stir. That's what you got there, I think. Could you smell the valerian? That was this and this. That should have been fairly easy to stir too. Did any of them give you a greater sense of warmth or cold? Now, granted, the temperature was supposed to be pretty even in all of them. I think it came close. Was any of them warmer? This one? The last one was warmer? Okay.
This one was fairly.
Okay. Any other comments about any of them? Which one was the equisetum? Huh?
This one smelled the most to me.
Smells? Okay. D is the equisetum. When you smelled it in the jars going around, it had a pretty fragrant smell. Characteristic smell is how Kalisko described it. So a certain fragrance. shouldn't have been too hard to identify. C, which at least a couple of people thought was easiest to stir, that's the silica preparation. You might have seen enough particle to identify it, but I don't think so. And this was valerian, and that was valerian. That's plain water. Okay. What did you learn from this, if anything, please? Give me some encouragement.
Different characteristics.
Huh?
Different expressions.
Yeah, and you sensed it with your bodily instrument. You are the instrument to discern. And that's hopefully the major lesson to be learned from this little exercise. Okay. Now, I need A and B of the white buckets need to be stirred additionally for 20 minutes by somebody, if we can have a volunteer or two than that. Any other questions about this exercise?
So you're looking for a vortex, stir, and then mix it all up again so there's no vortex, and then, or you wait for the vortex to run itself out?
You can do a little wait between changing directions. In a stirring machine, they usually pause for 10 seconds, even 20 seconds, but between the time the machine creates a vortex in one direction and the time it switches. For one thing, if you try to change direction immediately, it puts too much torque on the paddles. A and B we will use to spray the beds, and for that spray and rake exercise, for those that can stay along for that now. I need an entertaining question to answer.
What would you do next after you've got everything stirred and if you're not
Okay.
So what's the next step?
Well, either to put it in a smaller bucket and take a whisk broom out there, or you can use a bathroom brush even.
You said the plastic was not the best. What is the best?
Copper, a little expensive. A clay crock. I don't know what the situation is in this area, but in Patrick County and in Floyd County, Virginia, you can go to Farmer Supply in Floyd or a farm market in Meadows-Sedan and buy clay crocks, 5 gallons, and occasionally you can buy as large as 10 gallons. They don't make crocks anymore in this country larger than 10 gallons.
Are you saying glaze?
A glazed clay crock. I didn't bring one, they're hard to transport. But if you're visiting Floyd and you call ahead and have them save a 10-gallon crock for you, you can stir 10 gallons.
Ace Hardware has them in Hendersonville.
Where?
Ace Hardware, I've seen it in there. Ace.
A 5-gallon crock. Any larger than that? You can find 8 and 10-gallon crocks at times. They make them in, I think it's called Rosewood, Ohio. So if you're traveling through Ohio and got room in your vehicle, you can pick one up there. You have to call ahead. Otherwise, there's a fellow in our area who makes apple butter kettles out of copper. He took one of those for the bottom and flipped over another one for the top and cut a hole in it. That's one of our stirring tanks. You can use stainless steel, but it should be non-magnetic stainless steel, which is a little more expensive. Stirring machines in Australia are mostly copper, and the people that make stirring tanks in this country are usually using stainless steel, non-magnetic. A fella up in Wisconsin is making them. I don't have his name and number handy at the moment, but we can get it for you if you want it. There's also compost tea brewers, which do a slightly different system of agitating or moving the water around. And you said you have one of those. And there's a fella in Long Island that used to be on the board of JPI that makes them, Steve Storch. He's got a good design.
You switch the directions?
Yeah.
You know, if you were using the composite that you put together of all the
Yes.
different elements.
You
would
don't need to stir. Guess
you don't
what?
need to stir,
No,
would there
you do
not
not.
be some value in
Now, it does not hurt
to stir?
if you do stir, because what are you doing?
You're connecting the cosmic.
You're bringing in the energies from the cosmos. And I have to look at the calendar for today and see what it says. I think we were fine with today, but I don't remember what the element involved is. But you don't want to be stirring during a blackout period for sure. You don't want to be stirring when there's any sort of negative indication. And you sure don't want to be stirring when you're in a bad mood.
What about prayer or intention or visualization while you're stirring?
That would be ideal. I didn't inflict any of that on you because that's me giving you a crutch, and you should provide your own crutch. So, yes.
How do you do this on a small scale, like the home garden? Just
Yeah, in a plastic bucket if that's all you can find. That's enough to cover a garden very nicely. Now your garden might not be a full acre, but if you're taking a smaller bucket, putting some of that in there and taking a whisk broom or a whitewash brush with the big bristles, dip that in there and bless it. Just flick the wrist and get the droplets on the water. We'll see that on the beds down here if you stay this afternoon. And,
But now the mixture that you have, when you mix that up, do you have to use that up in a certain period of time?
Probably within 48 hours after you first moisten it. You moisten it, it becomes paste-like, and there are organisms in there that break dormancy and start multiplying. Then you add more water so that you can distribute it more widely. And the little packet there, field activator, is enough to cover 1 acre. So yeah, you can start with that, and that's the only thing you really need to begin with. I would recommend that you get the silica preparation and the equisetum to make your own equisetum tea and let it ferment and have on hand. Now, I didn't speak to this, but I will now. I mostly deal with people with at least a basic grower's contract. It's got 10 units of 500 XP in it, 10 units of 501, and 10 units of valerian. And it's got 5 units each of the other preparations, which is chamomile, stinging nettle, oak bark, dandelion, and equisetum. I give you 10 units of valerian because valerian makes a great seed bath so that you can get quicker germination on lettuce a day or two ahead of time or a day or two sooner, healthier and faster germination on squash, tomatoes, etc. So it's an excellent seed bath. Valerian is for fruiting crops, squash, tomatoes, etc. It's also useful for beets as well, things like that. Yes, sir.
Is it a homeopathic, or you're actually trying to get it wet? Is it a homeopathic amount, or are you trying to
You're not watering in anything, except in special circumstances would you do that. Each droplet carries the forces of what you have just stirred and transferred to the water.
So for the bath, you don't need to get it actually wet, you just need to get it...
For a seed bath, seed bath is different. Seed bath, you potentize the preparation, whichever one you're choosing, and you do soak the seed for however long you need to, and it varies according to the seed. For bean seeds, half an hour is probably plenty. For beet and other hard seeds, you would soak much longer. Tomatoes,
Like a no-till drill? Seems like it would kind of get
you would dry it out.
dried out first.
Yeah, you dry it out first. The fellow that did the soybeans, he would take, put the sack in a garbage can, and then pull the sack out. It was a cloth sack, it's porous. So he would immerse it in the stirred chamomile preparation, pull it out, let it drain. Another technique used is to spread it out on the cement floor and spray it, shovel it around a little bit, and put it back in the sack. It's like a seed inoculant, but you're using a particular preparation and water to do the inoculating. But yes, you would want to dry it out before you put it in a seed drill. And drying for a small garden area is just spread it out on a towel or paper towels, and it would be enough. So.
And if you were going to plant something that was subject to a specific fungus, could you do a seed bath in 508 to support that?
Yes, you could. I was going to talk to you about how to grow your tomatoes without blight. First of all, equisetum, counter fungus. Second, valerian, usually to bring heat or warmth forces to the plant, especially in the early spring or late fall. And oak bark preparation for disease. And also 501, which brings in the light forces. We're talking about warmth forces with valerian, light forces with silica preparation. The oak bark might be, I don't know whether you call it thought forces or whatever, but it awakens the plant to its surroundings somewhat. And so it thinks for itself a little bit with the brain force of the oak bark. So.
If you think you have a harsh sunlight area, would you include the 501? Would that soften it?
You would include the 501. You just want to be very careful when you spray it. You want to spray 501 very early in the morning, usually, occasionally late in the evening. If you spray 501 at high noon, you'll burn the plants. You'll kill them. And so I'm studying 501 to spray under my pasture fences so I don't have to do as much weed eating. I haven't gone very far with that yet, but I intend to this next few months. Each of the preparations probably can be identified as related to a particular force or energy, and I haven't sorted all that out. I'm still working on it. Dandelion has to be a strong impulse for growth forces. The chart I handed out, talked about to begin with, talks about the preparation that relates to foodstuffs, producing food, or one that relates to reproduction and growth. And so they were identified that way, but beyond that, they were not particularly identified. So. Any other nice questions? 5 more minutes?
I have one.
Yes.
Well, you mentioned using live lime, or a lime that's alive in your compost?
Eggshells.
Eggshells.
Oak bark.
Okay.
I have taken ground up eggshells and I put them through a homeopathic process in lactose. I take it to the D8 potency, and the idea is that any time I spray something out on my very acid fields, I just throw some of that in the stirring tank and spray it out. So I think that'll help over time. But I have way too many experiments and potential experiments that I would like to do with the preparations. So I don't know how soon, but I'm going to be back here working with biodynamic preparations again at some point, I'm sure.
So when you apply the preparations, once you've got into it, does it affect your, basic soil test or cation exchange capacity, pH, that kind of stuff?
I can't really answer that. Over time, it would. Yeah, it has changed pretty acid garden soil to a better pH reading over time, not instantaneous, quick fix regimen.
I worked with JPI on the microbiology. I worked on a project at JPI for the microbiology of the soil and 500. When a marker, we were trying to determine if there are any markers that regular people would respond to when you talk about it scientifically. And so what we were looking for was a rise in the amount of fungi in the soil, which is a marker of more fertility for agricultural soils. And the 500 itself became much more fungal, and so did the fields with one application.
Say that again.
There, 500, when you put raw manure in, it's just raw manure, but when you take it out of the ground, there were more fungal components in there. Yeah, sorry.
So you're saying if you bury it in acid ground, it becomes more fungal?
Yes.
No, I'm not. There was
I would.
Okay,
Yes.
in the
I've got
samples
acid
that
soil.
I checked, there were the proportion of fungi to bacteria was ideal.
But that's being transformed, yes, in the soil, but mostly in the horn. The Steiner described the cow horn as part of the digestive system of the cow. The several stomachs of the cow, they're raying forces out of the organism, but the horn and the hooves block those forces and ray them back into the digestive process. And the cow with its four-stomach digestive process is the ideal organ or the ideal mechanism or whatever you want to call it for digesting anything. But it comes out as manure. We take that partially digested manure, we put it into a cow horn because it's not as easy to put back into a stomach or an intestine. We put it into a cow horn, and over the winter months, the forces in that manure ray back into that manure from the interior of the horn, and it transforms it into a substance that has more life in it, if you will. Thank you for that.
So we also looked at fields that had 500 applied, I think just one time. And then the study fell apart. There was some chaos there. And
well, let me speak to some other issue. When you start using the preparations, be prepared that things will change around you. The way I label it is that karma speeds up. And I have sometimes said that we might be better off to have warning labels on the preparations that be prepared for changes in your life. Your karma is going to take off big time. So, but haven't done that yet. But you will notice some things that you maybe haven't wanted to deal with. You start using the preparations, especially with any diligence, you probably should address some of those things. So just be forewarned. I don't want you to run away from the preparations, but things change. karma speeds up.